Hey everybody, welcome to Lawn Therapy. I'm your host, Justin Berg with Purple Care, and today I'm really excited to have as our guest Robert Stoltz. He is a local pest expert in good old North Texas, and I want to start talking about some bugs. So how you doing today, Robert?
Oh, doing good. Doing really good. It's a nice day in Texas.
It is. It is. When do you, and I know there's bugs 12 months out of the year here in Texas, good old Texas, which is, some of them are actually beneficial bugs even. We'll go over that later too. But what, as far as your cycle goes, maybe walk me through kind of what you see for bugs when they come out, the progression of them, where they're at in the winter, all that fun stuff.
Sure, yeah. So what normally, I don't have I wouldn't say it's an education in that I went to school and I have an entomology degree.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going off of field experience, which a lot of people will say that's
Even better.
Even better. So my experience, I've seen the insects be more active, usually between, I'd say, May to, we'll just say October.
Right.
But it depends on the weather. And of course, as you mentioned, in Texas, it could be warm enough in February.
Right.
And so going off of our current weather predictions and what we've been given, they're the way that they're talking about, temperatures,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that they would be being active soon. So that would be like, 55 degrees at night. Again, this isn't a scientific number that's been proven that I know of,
Right.
but it's just what I've experienced. And usually once the weather at night, I should say, when the temperatures at night are above 55 and they kind of hold, it seems like that's when the bugs start to become more active.
Okay.
And again, as I mentioned, it takes time for them to really kind of build up. And what I mean by that is it may start warming up. That doesn't mean that they're going to be in full swing.
Right. Right.
So we've got, maybe February, March, April, that's the buildup months.
Yeah.
So we're going to see, they're going to be increased activity. As you mentioned, doesn't mean that you aren't going to see something in the dead of the winter, January,
Right.
December. But, it's usually a buildup. We normally have the majority of the customers calling in because they're seeing a number of different insects, whether it be, insects or arachnids, spiders.
Right.
Usually May. May's kind of when it starts to hit, and that's whenever we really it starts to warm up and, and experience. So May through August is usually, I always say that's the height, or that's the main bug season. That's when we get, I'd say probably 95% of call-ins, people concerned with because they're seeing spiders or they're seeing ants or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So usually it's, I'd say May through August is the height or the biggest, the highest season.
The heat of the season. So once it's hot out,
yep,
expect to see, you're actually seeing.
If you're going to see bugs, because it doesn't, here in July, it could not get below 80 degrees at night.
Right.
So the bugs are happy. They're moving around,
Right.
because when it's cold, they don't move. And as you mentioned, it doesn't mean that they're gone. It doesn't mean that they're dead. Some of them cycles, they do die off.
Right.
But usually they're hiding, whether that be in the winter months, they're either underneath, debris, whether that's leaves or, underneath ground burrows or underneath wood, stacked wood, or just actually inside your home walls or something like that. And
right.
they can find their way inside, but usually, they're dormant
Mm-hmm.
most of the time in the winter months.
Very good. Very good. What is you brought up entomologist. What is your background? Like where'd you get started? How'd you wind up in the pest world?
So I had, I started at this company back in 2017,
Mm-hmm.
And I was working in a different department. And I know that I think you were struggling with holding technicians
Mm-hmm.
in the pest division.
Good ones, yes.
And so you actually asked me because my background before I worked at this company, I had an extensive career working in the home service industry.
Yep.
I previously did satellite for I think it was 13 or 14 years, whether that be repairing, installing, or quality control. But the bottom line was I had immense experience with going to a customer's homes, talking to the people, and that's one of the biggest challenges in any home service industry, but in the pest control industry especially. So I think that's why you approached me. You asked me about that and if I'd be interested. And as I mentioned, I wasn't too thrilled with the previous position I was in, and it's just that's a whole nother story. But I was fine with it. I was like, I definitely want to try it.
Mm-hmm.
So I had no background in it. I did grow up in Texas, as you mentioned. So in the going camping, my parents were really big on well, it was a different time as well. There weren't the electronics. So my brother and
Right.
I we'd pack up a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and throw it in a backpack and go down in the creek and be gone all day.
Right.
So I don't have fear, if you will. I have understanding, being concerned with it, but
Right.
I'm not afraid of a bug. If a bee lands on me, I'm not going to be that guy that goes screaming down the street like Chris Farley saying, bees, bees. But so I felt like when you asked me that, I was just like, yeah, I think that's something I could do.
Yeah.
So that's really how I got started in it. It was just, yeah, let me give it a shot.
And since then, now you're certified. You've got all your certifications. You're a certified applicator. All the correct training.
Yep. You start off with you get your technician license. You start off as an apprentice, and then you study and you go in and you get your certification, your technician license through the state. And then the next
How long is it? Is it about a year? Is it about a year for your apprentice? Is that what it is?
To get the apprentice? Honestly, it doesn't. It depends on. I believe it's 6 months, and that's a question. I could be wrong now because it's been a while.
Right.
I think that in order to get your technician license, you just need to be trained well enough. There's a certain. I know that there's the state requires 20 classroom hours.
You're right.
There's 40 in the field or on the job training hours.
Right.
And then there is an 8-hour course. I think that if once you get those criteria met, you can actually test as a pest control technician. So however long, if you do the math on that time frame,
Right.
that's within probably less than a month, you can be a licensed technician. There is some processes you have to go through, meaning requesting from the state to be tested. So
Right. So you can be a certified technician, but is that the same as a CA certified?
no, a CA is actually where you hold a license that the company you're, I guess, if you will, like the technicians work underneath you. The licensed or the apprentices work underneath your license. So I'm responsible for the knowledge base, making sure that the technicians are doing what they're supposed to. There's a certain amount of hours per week that you spend with the technicians in the field, making sure that you don't just get them licensed and they're on their merry way.
Right. So the certified applicator, how long does it take? So it takes maybe a month or so, depends on, to become a licensed technician. But how long does it typically take to become a certified applicator or CA?
Once you have your technician's license, you can actually turn around and if you feel confident going in and taking the test, you can be licensed as a CA pretty quickly as well.
Okay.
Of course, taking on the responsibility, because I know when you approached me about that, and that's a whole nother story, but about taking on the responsibility of the CA at this company, I know I told you then, I was just like, well, I think at the time that was 2021, I think, or maybe that may have been 2020 when you asked me about that late,
right,
2020. And I told you then, because I had been doing the pest control for about 2 years, I think two seasons, that I was like, well, I can give it a shot because I don't have an entomology degree.
Right.
I don't, I'm not.
How long was that test? How long was that test you took to become
the CA test?
Yeah.
It's 100 questions long, and it delves into. There's 2 parts to it. There's certified applicator questions, and there's about 50 of those. And then there's also just 20 general knowledge ones that you take when you go for the regular pest control test. So there's 2 sets, but you do them all at once.
Does the TDA, Texas Department of Agriculture, are they the ones that put that on, or is that actually a different?
It's through the state.
It's through the state.
There's a company that you go to and take the test. It's not like the Texas Department of Agriculture that you go to. But it's the state that puts it on. But obviously that's stuff that they go through, and they when you pass the test, you're certified through the state. It's an official license. I've also got the termite license as well. I did that last year. So our company has that as well. We've got the ability to do whatever's needed to do for termites as well.
Yeah. So you say that you don't have your bachelor's degree in, say, entomology or maybe a pest background, but it sounds like you still have a degree because you're licensed technician, then certified applicator, and then now licensed in termites.
I've been doing this for more than 4 years.
Yeah, and you've been been doing this for a while. And like you said, it's interesting because on the landscape side of business, we run into the same thing where hey, we see the book says this. The book says, hey, this plant is a full sun plant. And we're like, well, maybe that's true in, I don't know, Oklahoma. Maybe that's true in California. But this plant is not a full sun plant in Texas.
Right.
And we see it constantly. We're people will even come to us like, hey, this plant says it's a full sun plant. I'm like, we know that, and that's what the book says, but it's our field experience that really gives us the edge, right? And that's kind of what you're talking about too, is you've got to go out there and literally see what some of these products do to bugs, how it works. I mean, I think it's very interesting, like what some of it does to their nervous system. I think it's very interesting. Like a lot of the products you put down actually goes after nervous systems. It's not like, hey, spray it and kill them. It's more of it's pretty interesting, some of the technology that's out there.
Oh yeah, and in most cases it does. It breaks their synaptic gap. So basically keeps their nervous system from, their brain shuts down. It shuts down their heart, shuts down their lungs. It basically, over a period of whatever length of time it's going to take to kill that bug. Some bugs it's quick, some bugs it's not. Just depends on, when I say bugs, I should say insects, because there's a difference. You've got arachnids and you've got insects, right?
Right.
So spiders react differently.
Right. What is the difference? So you just pretend it's Joe Public that doesn't know anything about the difference between insects and arachnids.
The difference between what I always tell customers is, when you're dealing with an insect, they clean themselves constantly. So and that's how they ingest the product, unless they get a direct spray. So if I'm out there working in someone's yard, or one of the technicians is working in their yard, and they see an ant mound and they can spray that ant mound directly, or let's say it's a spider, let's say it's a grasshopper, a cricket, whatever that gets a direct spray, that product that we put on that insect or arachnid will work rapidly. Now, it also depends on what we're using at the time. In certain times of the year, we use different products because of the levels of insects.
Sure.
They're not as many or not as active during the wintertime. We don't need to use the products that are geared more towards an arachnid, whether that be a spider or a scorpion. But it actually will affect them very rapidly. We can go out and find an ant mound, or I can see a wolf spider run by, and if you spray that directly, within probably less than 60 seconds or so, they'll be doing what I call the rave dance of death. They'll be squirming around on the ground. Ant mounds are funny. You watch them, after you spray them, there's thousands of them, and it looks like they're all dancing, because the product is literally affecting their nervous system that fast. It is extremely quick.
The dance of death.
The rave dance of death.
The rave
because it looks like a rave. If you look at all these thousands of ants, it looks like a party going on, and they're not having a party, but that's what it looks like.
The rave dance of death.
Yeah.
I did not know you called that, but that's gonna stick, I think.
So and spiders will do the same thing. They're on an individual level, right? You don't see a colony of spiders, thank goodness, because then we would be getting phone calls nonstop.
Right.
But same thing. If you spray a spider, they're going to very rapidly, affect their nervous system. That product will, and they'll die within. Sometimes it may take more than 60 seconds, but I've seen plenty of them that's just 60 seconds or less.
Yeah.
They're gone.
Yep.
They quit moving. They might still be breathing, but their legs don't work anymore.
Right.
Or their heart stop at whatever it may be, whatever's actually going on inside the biology of that insect at that time, it's no longer going to live within minutes.
The synaptic gap.
The synaptic gap. Now, that's a direct spray. So one of the things I think a lot of people, a lot of the times get, I don't want to say confused on, but just don't have a good understanding, and we try to explain to them, is when we put down a barrier and it dries, it's still there.
Right.
It's going to last. Now, it depends on the weather. If it's, like we talked about in Texas, we get hot and cold. Today it's going to be 30 degrees. Tomorrow it could be 80 degrees.
Right.
You never know. But the weather breaks down that product when we place it on the ground, whatever the application rate is. If it's a liquid or a granule, it's the same thing. It's just a different way it's the vehicle. How do we get it to the ground or to the surface? And so, over a period of time, the weather will break down the product on the ground. So whether it's 60 days, 90 days, it's typically 90. We always tell people that the longest we really should go in between treatments is on a quarterly basis. You can go 90 days, but towards the end of that 90, whether it's at day 75 or day 80, I don't know, the product is weaker than it was when we first applicated it. So the amount that insect or arachnid crawls through and gets on them, and then they clean themselves. As I was saying a minute ago, the insect will go through that and they'll get the product all over them. Insects clean themselves regularly, whereas arachnids will not, or spiders will not. So a spider can crawl through a treatment zone, and it could be a week before he decides to clean himself. And the way that they clean themselves is they ingest whatever it is on them, the dust particles, the dirt from the ground, or whether it's the insecticide that they could just crawl through, that they'll bathe themselves basically by consuming the product off of their bodies.
Right.
And they ingest it and it gets inside them. So, a big wolf spider may not get enough on him on day 75 that it's going to be that effective. It may start to make him lethargic. It may actually kill him. It may not. He might just be just fine, But An insect, on the other hand, when they crawl through it, they start cleaning themselves, almost immediately. Not because they crawled through that product, but just because you've ever seen a video of a fly. That's what they're always doing. You see them wiping down their eyeballs and their wings and their legs. They're constantly cleaning themselves.
Yeah.
So they're ingesting it, and it'll kill them a lot faster than spiders. So I mean, that was what you asked, which was how does it affect spiders differently than insects? And that's really from the the knowledge that I've received, whether that be reading in books or individuals who've been in the industry that I've talked with, or just from experience. That's typically what I've found.
Correct. So spiders, without it's obvious, but spiders are obviously harder to kill than your typical insect in general.
In general, they're a little more difficult just because of the effect.
They're dirty.
They're dirty little creatures. They really are.
They don't clean.
They'll go crawl underneath your couch and they'll sit there filthy for weeks.
So as humans, basically, what I'm hearing is if we stay dirty and just germy and have lots of germs, lots of bacteria, we're probably going to be safer and probably live longer. Is that what I'm hearing? No, not the same.
No, it doesn't work that way.
Actually, a little bit of truth to that, isn't there?
Well,
yeah.
I don't know. It depends, because some people that clean themselves too much, they might actually not get enough of the dirt, the grime, or whatever you want to call it, to where their their nervous system or their
It's healthy to insult your immune system every once in a while just to test it. It needs to be tested. So I mean, it's pretty interesting. I mean, the spiders. I mean, they also I remember you telling me this in the past, but the surface area of what your typical insect touches the ground is much larger than the surface area of, say, a spider. A spider has 8 legs that are, the size of the size, their feet are the size of a pin, right? And that's usually their body does not touch the ground
very little. Yeah, the surface area that they touch is minor.
Yeah, and so when they do clean, it's not
enough.
It's not enough product, and so they're very difficult to kill now. I think that's what people call, like, hey, I saw a spider. I'm like, sometimes we got to wait as long as a week
it could
just
be.
to let them. We're going to get them. Just give it some time. But I think people's impersonation is, or not impersonation, excuse me, people's belief system, not impersonation, is that, hey, we spray something on, put something down, and everything just nukes it. Everything dies. And I think it's important to know that there are products that absolutely do that, but those are not safe, I think, for humans, and they're really not just a good product for the environment. And I always try to tell people, like, listen, there's stuff that I can put down that's probably going to nuke this entire, yard, your whole footprint of your property, and you're not going to see bugs for a while. But is it really good for your animals and your kids? And, is it really the healthiest thing to do for the environment? And so we really try to shy away from those. And I think that's important. I think I was going to ask how you feel about that, of using safer products that still are very effective, but you just got to be patient. And why don't you talk to me about that?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely keep our technicians' safety in mind. And to that, what products they're using, because as you mentioned, there's products out there that are legal that you can purchase that are going to be a lot more harsh, that will take care of a situation a lot more rapidly than some other products, possibly. But in my experience, all the products we use, they're, again, they're extremely safe within reason. I mean, you definitely want to make sure that you're following the label. And if it tells you to wear a mask, or the rubber gloves, head, stuff like that. So it's just to be precautionary, but we definitely, ask our technicians to be safe with it. But in the concentrated form is when it's the most dangerous. But yeah, I mean, when we put the product out that we use, it's on the low end spectrum as far as on your warning label.
Are the products safe for kids, animals? I mean, are they safe? And I mean,
they, what I always tell, everybody reacts differently, as to anything, right? Some people can be allergic to a banana and some people cannot.
Right.
Some people may not be. So with pest products, you're not going to know until you know.
Right.
But what we always tell customers is that to give there's a reentry time. There's a period in which you want to gain access to where we treat, whether that be on the outside or the inside of their home. In short, yes, they're safe for the family and the pets, but we always ask them to wait until that product is dry. Once it's dried and it's had an opportunity to bond with the surface that we've applicated, it's going to be safe. It's been tested and it's fine to be inside. I mean, and because all the products we use, there's on the labels, it tells you where you can and where you cannot use it.
Right.
So we make sure that if we're going to be using something inside your home, does the label say you can use it inside?
Right.
So, Because we've had people, I mean, I can tell you stories for days, I'm sure, but we've had people that, and one in particular, there was one time where I went into this customer's, we did it, it was the first time, it was the initial service treatment for them, did the inside and did the outside. She had like 3 or 4 dogs and treated the outside of her property. And there's a certain perimeter out that we spray, so it's not a small little like 1 foot area. It comes away. There's a pretty good distance away from the foundation of the home. And I was going through, if you call it customer education with her, or just cautionary, making sure that she understood certain things. And I told her, I was like, do me a favor, make sure you keep your dogs contained for a certain period of time. I said, I can't tell you exactly how long that's going to be, but if you wait about 45 minutes to an hour, probably going to be dry outside before you let them back out. And I said, you can also, obviously you can look at the concrete outside. If it's still wet, it's not dry.
Right.
So wait. I was in the truck about to leave, and I could hear dogs barking. I looked, and she'd already let them out. They were outside rolling around in all the product I just sprayed.
Right.
And where I'm going with this is that went back 30 days later to do the follow-up visit, and those dogs were fine.
Right.
So they were out there, and that's why we try to make sure that we emphasize that to the customers, because family and pets, we're not really too worried about the adults, because hopefully they have enough sense not to taste the product, stick their, whatever, but like little kids, young children, infants especially, and or pets, they may stick their nose in there. They may, kids, that's what kids do. Let's see what this tastes like, So we don't really want anyone to ingest it or get it directly on their skin if possible.
Yeah.
But
I know you're an intelligent guy, and I know you do your research, but there's a lot of negative press out there in pest control. And it's typically because it's being used, in my mind, incorrectly. It's being maybe used directly on food or whatever. And I'm not going to go down that path of who's right or wrong, but I think the way that you've explained the way you apply it and how you apply it, and in the concentrations that you apply it, is actually very safe for humans, for children, for pets. And yet it still is going to protect, because there are insects out there that are very harmful to humans, right?
Right.
That we need to remove, or it can be very harmful to your structure of your house. I mean, like termites, obviously, you don't want to lose your largest investment.
Right.
But there's also, fleas and ticks and Lyme disease. There are diseases that are carried by insects that we don't want those insects around. If we can protect our, at least in our home, we want to do that. And so I guess where I'm going is that, with all the bad press, I mean, and I know you've done your research, but, do you feel safe applying them? But also, what's your thought on that? Like with the bad press of there, how are you feeling about all that? And what do you think about pest control?
With again, as I mentioned, reading the label, I think the way that's a common term, which is the label is the law.
Right.
So follow the label. If the label says don't do this, then don't do it. If it says, to wear a respirator, wear a respirator. Follow what it says. That being said, I think where a lot of the times it's a challenge for us is because there's a lot of people out there that believe more is better, and we do live in that society. We're talking about supersize me, and
Agreed.
And a lot of people think that if you come out and spray, or I want you to come out and spray, that's going to fix the problem. And the sad truth is that technician that's out at your home is a licensed individual who has had to take a and he knows that. But there's a lot of people, there's a lot of clients, unfortunately, they want you to spray. It doesn't matter, because they feel, it just gives them that feeling of that placebo effect.
Kill it now. Kill it now.
It's
I
done.
want everything dead.
Everything's going to die now. And it's like, well, there wasn't anything inside your home. So I think where it goes to, like what you just asked, which is, how do I feel about it? I was like, as long as, and usually you can reason. Most people, you explain it to them and they go, oh, well, that makes sense. Once they understand, which is the case with most, once you explain to them that, I don't need to spray inside your home, you're not seeing anything, that's because what we're putting on the outside of your home is working. And we're doing that in a certain cycle period. It's not necessary for us to spray inside. So really, I think what happens is some of the situations where you hear about, whether it's insecticides or pesticides or whatever, it's because someone's either using a product illegally, they're using it incorrectly, they're not following the label, or they're allowing someone to influence them and to just be like, oh, well, I'll just go ahead and spray it. Which I know I talk to my technicians all the time, and I say, guys, if you have a customer who's requesting it for you to spray inside, as long as we're following the label, that's fine. We can go ahead and go inside, because what we want to do is we do want to make these people feel safe in their homes. That's the point of the service.
Right.
But try to educate them, because when I say talk them off the fence, I've had plenty of clients that I've explained to them, look, it's not necessary. You're asking me to come inside and literally nuke the inside of your home. When I say literally, that's not literally.
Right.
Come inside and spray all the baseboards because that's what maybe a previous pest control company did. And I try to tell them, I was like, well, maybe that previous pest control company had a different process to how they treat your home. Maybe they're not doing a decent job on the outside of your home. And maybe they need to do the inside on all the baseboards. And so these people have that in their head. Well, that's what I need.
Yeah.
So
But I agree, and I know that when I first moved to Texas, and there was a whole new array of bugs that I, just hadn't seen. Like, we don't have fire ants up north. I mean, that's just something that we'd never seen before. Even really cockroaches, we didn't have a lot of we weren't exposed to a lot of different cockroaches, especially the German ones. If there were German cockroaches up north, I never remember hearing about or even seen them. So now we've got a whole slew of different bugs down here, whether it be tarantulas or whatever the case may be. There's different bugs. And when I first got here, guys came in and literally just hammered my house on the inside. They sprayed all the baseboards. They literally went around and sprayed every baseboard in my house. And every time they would come back in a quarterly fashion, they would do the same thing. And then now I've learned, obviously, from you, that is absolutely what you do not want to do.
Yeah.
So walk me through what do you do differently, and why, what is your process, and how is it better for humans? How is it better for pests? All the things.
So I wouldn't say that I handpicked them, but we definitely looked into the products that we're using on the inside and the outside of the house.
Sure.
But in particular, the outside. I think there's a lot of companies out there that they just backpack.
Right.
And what I mean by that is they have a backpack that holds like 4 gallons of product, and they go around with a little wand and they spray, and they maybe only get like a 5-inch band around the exterior of your home, and that's a lot smaller barrier. So, and I mean, if it may be successful, I don't know, but that's not the process we do. We actually do a power spray treatment, which there's other companies that do that as well, but we do a power spray around the exterior of the home, which it puts out it gives us the ability to have not only speed, but as well a larger surface area where we're able to applicate to. Mm-hmm. So we're able to create a much larger barrier. Following the label, I keep saying that because that's a thing. You follow the label. There's a certain mixture rate in which you use. As long as you're following the label correctly, that barrier is sufficient. And really, I mean, again, you're going to still see things on the inside of your home, even with pest service. You may still see things. It depends. I know that a large portions of our clients are new homes, new subdivisions, and so a lot of the homes we deal with, even though we're applicating, it may take a couple of seasons. And I always like to use the word season because whenever you say years, it sounds longer.
Right.
But it may take a couple of years before that new build or that new subdivision settles down, because they come in there and they'll grade off and slap down 200, 300, 400, 500 homes, which was just literally, a pasture a year before or less. Dependence on how quickly they're building, But that's going to cause a lot of influx. It's going to cause a lot of movement. There's so much disruption between not only the insects, but also the reptiles and the rodents and everything that was living in that area, whether it was a field or a wooded area. So there's all that movement, and that product that we put down is definitely going to do an excellent job, but it may not be able to contain or hold back. As we said a little while ago, between like that May to August, you're still going to potentially see stuff. Mm-hmm. But in most cases, I mean, some of the neighborhoods that we started treating 3, 4, 5 years ago, we rarely, if almost, don't ever hear from any of those people anymore. And what I mean by that is they're not calling in the middle of the summer saying, hey, I'm having problems. I mean, there's still the occasional, because fire ants is a different type of insect where they're extremely intelligent. In fact, they're probably one of the most difficult insects to deal with, ants in particular, but fire ants as well. They'll find a way. They'll do whatever they got to do to find their way in. If they've detected something inside of your home that they want, whether that's food, water, or shelter, there's a lot of them, and they're smart, and they'll figure it out. I've actually had a situation one time where I had a glue board, and I placed some peanut butter in the middle of that glue board. This was because a customer had a rodent and they were wanting to catch. So we put that glue board down in their garage. Well, when we came back a week later to check it out, there was a little bitty tiny bridge of pebbles and stones and little sticks and grass and ants, unfortunately, that had fallen off to the sides. But they created a bridge. They got to it and picked every bit of that peanut butter off except that bottom layer that was attached to the glue board. They literally figured out, they problem solved how to get to that peanut butter, and they got that peanut butter off that glue board. So they'll do whatever they need to. If they got
Ants are engineers, huh?
right, they'll find a crack or a crevice, and once they're in, and it takes a little bit. It could be more than one visit before we're actually able to get rid of the ants. Because when we go out there, unfortunately, what happens a lot of the times is the customer might have sprayed Raid.
Right.
They see the ants, they spray Raid, and then the ants, let's call the pest company, and then they ask us to come out, and we come out there, and it's like, okay, well, unfortunately, now you've sprayed Raid or you've sprayed something, and you've disrupted their pheromone trail, and now there's no ants here. So I don't even know what kind of species of ant you're dealing with,
Right?
Because that's a challenge. If you can't really go in there, and because there's different baits for different ants, so it can be a challenge.
Yeah.
It can be a challenge to try to get rid of the ants in particular in that scenario. But
So you put an envelope around the house on the outside. So you put basically a protective envelope around the house.
Yep.
And that's kind of why you need to stay up with it quarterly, because your products are breaking down. As long as you protect the outside, most insects have to cross that barrier. Therefore, don't do it the old school way, which is come inside and hammer all the baseboards.
Correct. Yeah.
That's a very unhealthy way for
I would
humans.
agree.
So you go in inside, you still going inside. I mean, I guess the initial is what you do, correct?
We do on our initial flush out. We like to treat the interior as well as the exterior. It doesn't.
When you go inside, where are you going though? You're not hitting every baseboard. You're going, where are you going?
In most cases, and I keep saying in most because we usually stick to the rooms with plumbing, bathrooms, kitchen, laundry room, garage. That's
Right.
where we're going to stick with, because those are your main source of entry points for insects on a new home. Because it's a new home, it hopefully was built correctly. The easiest way for an insect to get inside of a home is going to be maybe a front door, back door, or garage door. If those doors are closed and sealed correctly, they're not going to be able to find their way in. So the next best way in is, in Texas, we have what are called weep holes. And it's like every so often throughout the brick, down at the base of the foundation, there's a hole there, which they allow this for the moisture to leave the home's foundation, keep that the foundation from cracking. But those unfortunately leave access points for insects to get into the interior walls. So once they get in between the brick or whatever the outside material is, usually it's only brick that's going to have weep holes.
Sure.
But once they get in between that outside material and the inside sheetrock, they have access inside that interior wall cavity. From there, they're going to follow straight lines, because insects usually follow a straight line, whether that's a baseboard or whether that's a water line. They find that water line, they get on that water line, and they crawl along that water line until it enters into a bathroom, a kitchen, a laundry room, or garage. They've now gained access inside of your home.
Okay.
That's one of the main entry points that they find their way in. Again, as I mentioned, there's plenty of these new homes that are being built so quickly that I'll tell customers all the time, if I'll notice when the doors close and I'll see like the weather stripping on the door, if you see daylight, which happens a lot, I'll tell them, hey, you want to make sure and get that fixed. If your home is still under warranty, you might want to have the builder come out, or save yourself a lot of time and headache, and you might want to go down to the Home Depot store, the Lowe's store, whatever the convenience store is that has product, and get some weather stripping and fix that, because that's a direct, immediately in portal, if you will, inside your home. An insect crawls through that, and they go from outside to inside your home instantly. Whereas if they go through a weep hole, there's a lot more of a journey for them, if you will, to find their way inside. And I have people all the time that'll have really bad scorpion issues or whatever it may be, and they'll say, well, it's over here by the front door, or it's over in the front living room, or it's by the kitchen or whatever. One of the first things I go look for is a door. Is there a back door, garage door, front door, whatever. And if I look and see daylight, I'll tell them, I was like, well, you have a problem. That's clear.
Right.
That's actually how they're getting in. So that's the source. And I always love to use the analogy. If you have a sink that's leaking and water's pouring over the side of the sink, what's the first thing you should do? It's not let's go get a mop and a bucket. It's let's turn the water off. Let's stop the water flow. Then we can start the cleanup. And of course, when we're out in the field and we're at a customer's home, we can't tell them, well, we're not going to do anything until you get that door fixed.
Right.
That's not what we say to them, but we just want to make sure that they know, hey, stop that entry point. Right. And then that's going to probably stop the majority of your problem right there. And then that keeps that insect on the outside in that big barrier that we like to put out on the outside. And then if it's necessary, we might still applicate some product on the inside of that home. Maybe it's near that entry point, just to make sure that, they're they're not getting attacked by a scorpion or whatever. A lot of people, unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not afraid, don't get me wrong, I don't want to get stung by a scorpion or bit by an ant or whatever. But a lot of people, either they don't know because they've just moved here from wherever. We've got a lot of people moving to Texas right now. There's a lot. They're from different climates. And so maybe they have, I don't know, out in Arizona, maybe I don't know because I'm not from Arizona. I've never done research. Maybe there's a poisonous scorpion out there that is deadly. Maybe you do need to go to the ER. So when they see a scorpion in Texas, they put two and two together and think, well, I need to go to the ER because I got stung by a scorpion. That's not to say that someone may not, what if they go into anaphylactic shock? We have some people who, they're allergic to fire ants here in Texas, and it's dangerous. Mm-hmm. So never telling someone, oh, don't worry about it. Seek medical attention if you think it's necessary. But as far as an insect goes or an arachnid goes, unless it's one of the ones I always tell people, black widows and brown recluses are the ones you need to be worried about. Those are the two spiders in Texas that are of concern.
Brown recluse, I would say that's got to be the most dangerous one. I'd rather be bit by a black widow than a brown recluse.
I wouldn't want to be bit by either one.
No,
I've been bit by a brown recluse.
Yes, you have story. I don't know if we can, John, can we get the camera? But hold up, you've got.
I don't know if you can see it.
It's that. Yeah, you got a nice little scar on your hand. Yeah. That is pretty impressive. And so when you get bit, so a lot of people up north don't know this, but when you get bit by a brown recluse, it basically you have kind of, is it like a pus sac or whatever that's inside, and it starts to eat away at it's a flesh-eating thing, is it not?
It is, but I believe that from what I understand, obviously from firsthand experience and hand experience.
Yeah.
It affects.
Bad dad joke.
I know, right? Sorry. It affects people differently. Some people can actually be bit by a brown recluse, and they may have some sort of an injury from it, whether that be a big, huge, pus area, whatever,
right.
Something, and then they never even go to the doctor. Mm-hmm. It goes away on its own. When I say it goes away, I don't mean that it's just like they never happen. It may cause some sort of major tissue, dissolves the muscle tissue and stuff like that. Some people don't. They just have like a little bump there and it goes away. And whenever I was in the hospital, because this happened whenever I was in 8th grade, I was in the hospital for 3 days. I believe it was 3, something along that line. And the doctors, the information they gave me then is that some people need medical attention and some people don't. Right. I would say that most people probably need to seek if they know. The problem is that in my case is that I just squished the spider and flushed him. Right. Because I was actually happened to be in a bathroom when it happened. I reached underneath the sink and there was the spider was underneath the sink. I was grabbing a towel and I didn't see a web. I didn't see a spider or anything like that. I just grabbed a towel. And the next thing I know, I felt this quick little, prick in my hand. And I'm thinking, oh, what was that? It felt like a bug bite. And then, of course, there's a little spider on the ground. I stomped on him, got some toilet paper, and flushed him. And went on with whatever I was doing at however old I was, 13, 14 years old. But it affected me. Like the skin actually turned black. Within 24 hours, the skin surface was black. Like if I took a Sharpie and drew a little spot on my hand.
Right.
And then I had I don't know if it was just from the venom that he injected in me. I had like not hallucinations, but I was like the walls were waving. I was having a real hard time staying conscious. I actually passed out. My poor mom actually was at home. She was literally fixing to go to church, and she had my younger brother go up and check on me. And of course, he said, "Well, my hand, his hand's black." So she had me come downstairs, and of course, she was on the phone calling the ER mm-hmm. or the hospital, saying, "Well, what should we do?" And they said, "Well, do you have the spider?" And she's like, "Well, no, we don't have the spider." So that's where I was getting with it, is that unfortunately, unless you keep the spider, they may not even know what you got bit by. But mm-hmm. So that's a whole nother thing. Medical people have to do what they have to do. But I passed out, hit my head. I actually went blind for. I'm thinking that was from the impact of hitting my head on a hardwood floor. But I went blind for which was probably just a few minutes. Mm-hmm. It felt like a long time because at that age I was thinking,
scared.
Like, oh no, I'll never be able to play a video game again or something or watch a movie or whatever. But my dad threw me over his shoulder and ran me outside, and I guess the blood flow came back. I could mm-hmm. see again. Got in the car. We got to the hospital, which would have probably normally taken about 15 minutes. It felt like about 5.
Yeah,
I'm sure he was moving a lot faster than normal. And then I was there for 3 days.
Yeah.
Doctor talked about potential amputation.
Oh, wow.
So again, it just depends. I think it depends on the person.
Yeah.
So
And they had basically had to scoop out, or I know,
they didn't have to scoop it out. No, it actually, and what happened is the skin, like I said, was black. It kind of acted more like a sunburn from there. That skin sloughed off. It basically started peeling away, peeling back, and then there was like it wasn't like you could see muscle tissue, but there was like like if you have a cut or a wound, there was red underneath there, right? But it was just like a little a hole where that black tissue or black skin tissue peeled away, and then it just over time. I mean, it probably took, I don't even know, months before that just slowly healed up and closed up. And now it looks like a burn scar. I like to tell people it's a cigar wound.
So that's not a graft in your hand.
That's not a graft. That's just literally
way
the
it
skin
healed.
closed back up. But like I said, some people, I've seen books, and I remember the doctor coming in and telling me about it. He was saying that some people actually have where you can stick a softball or even a basketball in that tissue area where that spider bit them, and it was able to consume the tissue and eat away the muscle tissue and whatnot. So like there was literally just a giant gaping hole there. The skin, they may had to have had grafts because the area was so large, but it's healed over, it's closed over now, but there's a giant crater.
Yeah.
Where there used to be a thigh or, whatever, calf muscle.
I have a friend that got bit by a brown recluse, and on the back of her leg, it looks like someone took like an ice cream scoop and like literally just scooped out right there.
Yep.
And that's literally what it looks like. And so I always tell people that brown recluse is probably the one. And it's funny that I'd say you see that one the least out of everything.
I'd agree. Now, I mean, the problem is there are probably, again, this is field experience, hundreds of brown spiders that live in the grass and find their way inside people's homes. Well, I always tell customers is, if you see a brown spider, it's most likely it's not a brown recluse, but that's not to say that it isn't.
Right.
I mean, they are here. But yes, I mean, I will say that I've honestly only ever seen 2, and they were pictures that the customer took with their phone.
Right.
Which I'm sure they probably discarded the spider, but I mean, I've never seen one literally just freely moving. They are known to be, they get their name recluse because they're going to hide. So what we normally tell people is be careful around like wood piles,
right?
If they've got like cinder blocks. But that goes to say with black widows, they'll do the same thing.
Right.
They will actually kind of harbor in those same areas. But black widows are usually more, brown recluses will roam. Black widows won't. Once they actually find an area where they build a webbing or their nest, so to speak, they'll usually stay put.
Okay.
But I would always advise anyone, if you get bit by any kind of spider, the black widow is the easiest one to determine right away whether or not it's what kind of a spider it was. And if there's any way you can, whether it's in a Ziploc baggie, whether it's in a mason jar, if there's a way that you can contain that spider without just completely destroying it, so that way if you do need to go to the hospital, you have something you can take with you and say, this is what bit me.
Right.
And that way they can look at it. They can have a specialist look at, get an entomologist to say, that is a black widow or that is a brown recluse. And now they know what they need to do to administer. A real quick story. My youngest son, I got bit by a snake a couple of years ago. He was climbing in a tree. It turned out to be just a little bitty like rat snake.
Right.
And I saw it, of course, initially when he came inside crying and he was acting like he's going to die, not because of the wound, not because of the pain, because of a snake biting.
Right.
I've got him trained, if you will. I don't want to say programmed, but I've told him, it's like, if you ever get bit by a snake, you need to come find me or someone, an adult, your mom, whatever, as soon as possible, and then let us see the snake or whatever. So he comes inside. I'm like, oh, where's the snake? Where's the snake? Where's the snake? And then he shows me the snake, and I'm like, okay, don't worry about it. And then, of course, he literally was saying, am I going to die? I'm like, no, you're not going to die. You'll be all right.
So he actually killed it. He actually got bit.
No, it was still it was in the tree.
Oh, okay.
What had happened is, I mentioned, he was climbing in the tree. He grabbed a hold of a branch and didn't see it because it blended in perfectly with the bark on the tree.
Right.
And he grabbed it, but it still was able to strike him, and it hit him. And it made a couple of small little, it was a little bitty snake.
Right.
Little bitty thing. And it just barely made a little couple of red dots on his hand.
Right.
So I actually, at first I was saying, it's just a rat snake. Don't worry about it. And then my mother and my wife were both like, should we go to the, should we, and I was just kind of like, in the back of my head, I was like, no. And then I started thinking, you know what though? I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
I don't want to be that guy where it turns out, oh, that's actually a baby rattlesnake and I made a major mistake, even though I would like to pride myself in being able to tell what a poisonous snake looks like. You never know. So I was like, yeah, let's go ahead and let's go. We better take him. That's the right decision. I got a little mason jar and I grabbed the snake and threw it in there. Took it to the hospital so that way I could say this is what bit him. It was still a little bit frightening at first because they were not snake experts.
Right.
And the first nurse that saw it said, "Oh, that's a copperhead."
Right.
No, it's not a copperhead. But I'd still recommend taking some. And that way, if you're, as long as you're like, because I was like, well, what did the specialist say? And they finally, the doctor came in and said that they had a friend that was looked at it and said, "Oh, that's just a rat snake.
Yeah.
He'll be fine." I mean, we still got the wound looked at. I think they still gave him some antibiotics just in case.
Yeah. Right.
But the bottom line is that I was able to take that up there because they were telling me, and I would assume that an insect bite would be similar. They said they were going to watch him over the next, I want to say it was 8 to 24 hours, and they were going to monitor the bite wound and see if it started to swell, the redness started to spread or whatever. So they would probably do the same thing with an insect bite. So if you don't have it, be prepared. You might be at the hospital for a little while. They're going to want to make sure. I think whenever I went in, they didn't wait that long. Of course, I was having a pretty severe reaction. They gave me, which was more painful than the bite was, I think I got over a dozen cortisone shots around the area where it bit me. Mm-hmm. It was quite painful.
Yeah.
The guy comes in with it looked like the old milk tray, and he sets that down, and I remember asking him, I was like, are those all for me? Joking. And he's like, yes. I'm like, what? I was like, oh, okay, here we go.
Here we go. So. Yep. Yeah, I know that when I moved to Texas here, there's a lot of snakes that you guys have down here that I just wasn't used to. I mean, the copperhead being, but what I learned was that most of the snakes that I've come in, I mean, I've yet to see hardly any poisonous snakes. I know that they're supposedly all over, and that's what the rage. Everyone's like, "Oh, Texas is full of snakes," and there is, but most of them I've seen mainly rat snakes, like you said, mainly bull snakes, beneficial snakes that I've now learned, like a good Texan, to just let it go. Just don't touch it. Like, it's good. It's going to get, it's going to eat rodents. Let it go. It's going to, yeah.
Even if it's poisonous, let it go. Don't get near it just because you never know. But yes, most snakes in Texas, even rattlesnakes, they kill a certain number of rodents per year.
Correct.
So,
right.
I mean, and I'm sure the copperheads do as well. But in most cases, the majority of the snakes you're going to come across are harmless. Mm-hmm. They're just scary. A lot of people they don't like spiders, or they don't like, those seem to be the two biggest things: insects or arachnids, and snakes. People, we have a fair share of customers who don't like rodents, but it's more snakes and insects that people,
sure,
their tolerance for them are zero. They have none. And but I would always just recommend, if you see a snake, unless you know what it is, I just leave it alone. You could call somebody. You can call us even. And the problem with a snake is that you might see it right now when you call us, but by the time we get out there, unless you're able to contain it, it's going to be gone. So unfortunately, there's really not a lot we can do about it. Unless you find one that's in like a bucket or a barrel or something like that can't get out, that's definitely something we can deal with. But poisonous snakes, it's to transport a rattlesnake, a copperhead, anything like that, or a water moccasin, it's not cheap, because that's dangerous. It's dangerous to handle one of those things. So.
It is. But I've been called over by my neighbors with, say, "Hey, would you grab your shovel?" And ask to kill. And I usually get over there. I'm like, "Hey, it's a good snake. I mean, if you want me to kill, I guess if you want it off your back porch, well, I mean, I can remove it. But most of the time, it's going to go away. Yeah. But you actually don't leave it alone. It's going to eat bugs. It's going to eat mice. It's going to eat rats. Mm-hmm. Like I know a bull snake. I've always kind of heard if you have one of those around, even though they're aggressive, it's good because you probably won't have a lot of other snakes around with him around. So
kind of like the brown recluse and the black widow with snakes, cottonmouths, which you're really not going to see a whole lot of. You're going to have to be near a water source more than likely.
Right.
But the copperhead is probably, in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, more dangerous than a rattlesnake. It's not because a rattlesnake will alert you, because a rattlesnake could literally stay still and not move, and you could potentially step on it. Right. They're obviously, people know that they'll rattle their tail if they're threatened.
Right.
They'll do that, but not always. So you could still potentially step on a rattlesnake. But a copperhead, you can't see them. They literally are almost invisible because they look just like a bunch of leaves on the ground.
Right.
And I've had encounters with them. They're a little bit aggressive, in my opinion. I've had one where I was weed eating around a tree, and there was a pretty good size, probably 3 foot long copperhead, which in my opinion, that's a big
one. Yeah, they're usually shorter and fatter.
Big copperhead.
Yeah.
And I didn't even see them. Like at first, I didn't even see them. You'd think because they're kind of an orangish brown beige color, you know, and it was green, middle of the summer grass, and a brown tree. You'd think that it would have stood out almost like a Christmas light.
Right.
No, it didn't. It blended right in, and of course, I saw it, and I was like, whoa. And he kind of struck at me a little bit, and so I had the weed eater, and I went to swipe at him. And then we proceeded to fight each other for probably the next minute. It felt like, because I would swing and miss, and as I was pulling the weed eater back, he would strike at me, and I'd swing and miss, and he'd strike. And finally, I was just like, "This is stupid." So I like instead of swinging back again, I waited a little bit longer. And then whenever I swung, the timing was perfect, and he went to strike right when the weed eater hit him, and got rid of him right there and there. But I was just like, man. So that's pretty aggressive behavior for it to continually strike at me, which, it's just trying to defend itself. But, I can't imagine, what if there's the family pet or, a little kiddo running around in the yard. I've seen the videos, I'm sure you have, where a kid comes walking up, look what I got, and they're holding a snake. What if they do that with a cottonmouth or a copperhead or whatever? Yeah. So.
Yeah. As far as, cockroaches go, I know that there are, one thing I learned about Texas, there's different varieties of cockroaches, but size does matter when it comes to cockroaches. I've noticed that some of them like true water, but I think when people see this big brown cockroach, those are actually the most tame or the least to worry about. Just walk me through cockroaches a little bit.
So with cockroaches, I'd say size matters not so much in their actual size, but the size of the quantity. The quantity does matter. So in other words, if you're seeing a lot inside of your home, then you're dealing with more than likely either a water bug. That's actually American cockroach. That's the scientific.
So it's a water bug. It's the American cockroach is actually a water bug. I know that's what everyone sees.
Reverse. The water bug is actually known as a American cockroach.
Got it.
So, but those are the bigger ones, the big brown ones.
Those ones everyone freaks out over, and those are the.
But I think people. Yes, I agree that they fly. Which could be terrifying in the middle of the night. Something lands on your face. You'll hear them. But the American cockroach is similar in that. It can invade your home, but it's less. I don't want to say they're uncommon because they are pretty common, but really I know you mentioned earlier that the German roach. That's not a Texas bug. That can be anywhere. I know if you never dealt with them up north, that's just because of the conditions you were in.
Sure,
were either non-conducive. The German roaches wasn't introduced, or they weren't interested. So
didn't know that.
German roaches are similar in that they're not related, but they're that we call them hitchhiker. They're a hitchhiker insect, just like a bed bug. I know there's another one I can't think off the top of my head right now, but basically an insect that can find its way inside your home, whether that be you go stay at a hotel, or whether you go to the grocery store. Or Amazon delivers a cardboard box because roaches love cardboard. So let's say a German roach is hiding inside of the fold of a cardboard box that Amazon delivers to your home, and you don't know it, and you take that box out inside your home, open it up, and that roach very sneakily gets away, and it happens to be a female that lays. They carry the egg up until the point where the babies hatch, so they don't lay an egg somewhere and leave. They actually carry the egg sac with them. I cannot remember the name of again, I'm not an entomologist. But there's a name for it off the top of my head. It starts with an E. But they'll hold up to about 30 to 40 babies, if you will, inside that until when they hatch. And so you got to think about it. If let's say they lay 40, half of those are female, and it's a 30-day cycle. In 30 days, if those 20 have another 20 per, you can see where they can exponentially grow. Their population can grow rapidly. So in the American roach is similar in that they can grow in numbers as well. So I would definitely say in Texas, if you're seeing mass numbers, quite a few on a daily basis, then you probably have a roach infestation inside of your home. And the reason why I say that is because there are other roaches, if you will, that live outside. They're external, they're native to the terrain outside. There's one that we see a lot, and it's usually only between actually two species. There's the Asian roach, and then it's called a Turkestan roach. There's two different. The Turkestan, there's a male and a female. They look differently. There's definitely a difference in the Asian roach, but they look very similar. So it almost looks like 3 different types of roaches.
Sure.
But those can find their way inside your home, but typically they live on the exterior of the home. What's crazy is that the Asian roach, almost as I mentioned, looks just like the German roach. There's very little difference in them. There's the coloration, the length of their wings. So there's a few features. If it flies, it's not a German roach.
Right.
It's probably an Asian roach. But we've had customers that call us, or they'll take a picture and they'll send this in and say, "Hey, is this a German roach?" And the only way that for me to really answer it is like, how many of those have you found? How many of the particular looking roach have you found inside your home? I'm like, this is the only one. I was like, all right, well, we don't need to come outside and as we say, nuke the inside of your home. Not yet. And then there's a certain process we do, and it's not a nuking, but there's a certain way we get rid of them once you have an infestation. But let's wait a little bit. And in a week or two, if you're still seeing that particular looking roach, then we need to come out and do an assessment.
There's a problem.
Take a look at it, yes.
Yeah.
Because if it's a German roach, they're not going to go away.
What are some of the bugs you see in Texas? Like, just give me if you don't mind, give me a list. But what are some of the more common ones that you run into quite often?
Oh, the like field cricket, the black cricket, you see that a lot. That's going to be, again, we're looking at between May and August. You'll see a lot of those, a lot of crickets. Crickets are a food source. Grasshoppers are difficult to control, and if almost impossible, because they're considered a flying insect. They have wings. So if a grasshopper jumps and flies from your neighbor's house and lands in your yard, and they land on the side of your home, and then they jump off and they fly off, they never land in that barrier that we placed, so therefore they didn't land in the product. We can't guarantee against grasshoppers.
Right.
But grasshoppers are a big one. I mean, that's an insect that will be in the yard. Now, as I mentioned, if they land in the product, it will kill them,
right.
Depending on the dosage, if you will.
What else do you see? What are the bugs?
I'm thinking of like the food source bugs. You're going to have a lot of, like you got people call them roly-polies. There's a lot of those little guys. There's a lot of people are, I don't want to say freaked out by them, but I think they are. They're called earwigs. They're long, skinny insects. When I say long, maybe about a half an inch long. They're a dark brown, but they have this distinct like pincher on their back end.
Right.
And I've actually, in my research, if you would want to call it that, I've looked and said that's what those are for, is literally it's kind of like 2 bucks with antlers, and they fight over the females. That's what they use those for.
They look nasty. But
they fight one another, and
that's it.
So I'm trying to think of some other ones.
Fire ants, I'm sure you see.
Oh yeah, fire ants always. And there's all kinds.
You see many Argentine? I know that's they've kind of.
Yeah, they're less common, but yes, there's Argentine, there's rover ants. Rover ants are the little bitty tiny black ants you'll see crawling around like your bathroom sink a lot, or maybe in the kitchen. They're usually spotted in an area like that because they're so small and hard to see, but they're walking across maybe a white sink, so they stand out.
Right.
You've got your acrobat ants. Yes, as you mentioned, the fire ants, and then of course, there's hundreds and hundreds of more species of insects, but you've also got your arachnids too, your spiders, and those are the big ones. Typically we usually deal with, I think ants actually it's known that they're the largest nuisance insect. I don't want to say in the whole country, but I'm pretty sure that's pretty accurate. It may even be world, I don't know, but that's actually one of the ones that the reports that I've heard is that ants are the biggest one, but I feel like people complain more about spiders. Yeah. Spiders are the biggest issue we have, spiders and scorpions. Which, with understanding, spiders can be scary. They have multiple legs. They seem to chase you. A lot of people will say, "Oh, they chase me." No, they're not chasing you. They may be trying to get up your leg. Maybe they feel safer if they get. I don't know why, but if they're running towards you, they're not like running at you like a boogeyman.
Right.
Scorpions, again, they can sting, and I've been stung by scorpions. I've been. It's not fun. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like, let's see
like
what
a
that
bee
feels
sting. Like a bee sting.
Like a bee. And that's a good one too. Wasps. That's another, during those same months, almost. Not to say that there can't be wasps. If tomorrow, let's say it's 85 degrees in Texas, there could be wasps flying around.
Yeah.
Next day it drops back down to 50 degrees and you don't see them anymore. That's just because they don't fly around when it's cold. But wasps are another big one where they're difficult to control or even remove because in my experience, you cannot, and I've asked, there's certain things you can try to do to prevent, which we do. We knock down nests because they'll come back and reuse the old nests. So in other words, if there's like a paper wasp,
right,
and if that nest is left alone in the next season, you could have a different wasp that flies along and finds it and decides, hey, that's a great starter home, if you will,
Right.
and they'll build up shop right there. The problem is that when they're flying around, there's nothing we can really do. There's not a product we can spray
Yeah.
that's going to stop them.
They're safe in the air.
Yeah. Now, you could sit there with the spray hose all day long and waiting and sitting there spraying as they're moving, but that's again, now you're creating drift of product because now you're spraying it up in the air and the wind carries that off, and that's a big no-no. A TDA regulation violation, if you will. So yeah, we can't really do that. Not to say that I haven't done something similar to that before. I actually was at a customer's home and they had a weep hole and there was a bunch of red wasps that kept coming out. Well, there was one or two that were flying back and forth, and the customer was telling me like they keep coming out of there. So I sat there just to, not to humor the customer, but I was, if you call it curiosity, I was like, well, I wonder how many are in there. So I kind of sprayed the weep hole a little bit, just a quick little blast. And whenever I did, some of that product went up probably inside, and I don't know if it caused some agitation, but 3 or 4 of them came out, and then 4 or 5 more came out. And then by the end, there had to be at least 50 red wasps dead everywhere.
Right.
They do die on contact with product, as I mentioned before, with most insects, very quickly.
So I think I know your philosophy on this is bees are good, hornets and wasps are bad. I mean, and I realize if you have bees in your homes, we got to get rid of them either way, but bees are beneficial. We know that.
Oh,
so
yeah,
you're
they're
really
protected. They're an endangered species.
Yeah, and so really, I mean, people call. I think you get that call all the time, like, "Hey, I've got bees," and we get out there, and I'm like, "You know, bees, it's hornets and wasps."
Yeah, it's something like that, exactly. Yeah, and a lot of people, soda pop, versus Coca-Cola, depending on what part of the country you're from. Some people call wasps bees just because, or they just
Right.
don't know. But yeah, we get that a lot where people say, well, can you do something about the bees? And I always have to say, well, we no.
Right.
And then of course educate them, tell them like, well, they're beneficial, they're a pollinating insect.
Yeah.
You can't spray plants that have pollinating, blooming flowers on them because that's pollen, and that means, we're now killing endangered species, and that's a big no-no. So we're not going to do that. Of course, we explain to the customer why. We don't just say no. But we have a lot of times customers will call and request us to come out and take care of. Sometimes it is just wasps. So they'll actually call them by wasps, but. And we get out there and they're like, well, where's the wasp nest at? It's like, oh no, I just saw them flying around. Of course, that's an education moment where you have to then talk to the customer and say,
Right.
okay, so, until there's a nest, you really can't, because like I said before, you have to just stand there all day in their yard with the hose, just there's one, and that's if you're a good aim, if you can actually knock one out of the sky. But
Right. What are some of the things that a person can do to maybe reduce pest issues? I know that there's certain things that absolutely attract more bugs, and just as a homeowner, what are some things that people can do to kind of reduce their foot traffic when it comes to insects and
probably
spiders?
a couple of the biggest things that come to mind for me immediately would be your yard, your grass. If you have the grass cut, if it's over ankle high, you're creating a conducive condition, allowing them to come in. It gives them cover. There's a canopy there, the protection and stuff like that, especially for all the crawling insects. But you knock down the food bugs, and then you start to knock down the predator bugs because there's nothing for them to come around. Not to say that they're still going to be there. They're still going to be there, but that'll definitely help. Another one would be stacking wood up against your home, whether that's for termites or whether that's for black widows or scorpions. They're going to definitely find those, it's going to interest them. That's going to be a conducive condition for them because they're going to be like, hey, that's a good place to harbor or hide or whatever. And they're also looking for, like I said, the food insects that could be hiding in that. I don't know if I mentioned or not, but too, as well, stacking wood next to your home, termites, not a good idea.
Right. How about hygiene? Just general hygiene, cleaning up around the house.
Yep.
I know that I hear that all the time. Like, just if you're one of those people that like leaves plates of food out or don't do the dishes, that alone is going to bring them in.
Oh yeah, inside your home. If you get that hitchhiker bug, German roach, and if you have dirty dishes everywhere, I can't remember the exact amount, but I believe it's like the size of a dime, I should say. A drop of grease can feed like 50 roaches for a month or something like that. It's astronomical what they can do to survive.
Right.
They'll even eat their dead, but roaches will live on virtually nothing. So if you have a unkept home, whether that be from dishes, and I would say 99.9% of the customers that we go to, it's usually immaculate. There's very few homes that where you have to. I've had to have that conversation, and it's uncomfortable. I've had one customer one time where they kept complaining about roaches, and I had to tell them, I was like, well, there's nothing more I can do for you at this time. I would love to help you with your problem, but until you clean up the sink full of dishes and the pots and pans on this, until you can get the conditions under control, it's not
Take
gonna
away the
happen.
food source, right?
Yeah. And I had one. This customer was like, okay, and she signed up for the service. And I mean, I even told her, I was like, so they had like a plastic container that they bought at, the grocery store that had little slices of cake in there, and it wasn't closed all the way. And even if it was, it's not sealed all the way. I was like, they can get in there. They're small. They can fit through those. There's even vents in the side of it. They're going to get in there. Oh, okay. Well, I came back next week. It was still sitting there, and there was less pieces of cake in there, so they're eating it.
Ugh.
I've had another customer who had a coffee pot where I finally figured out that is actually where the insect or the German roaches were. They were inside the coffee pot, and while the guy's sipping on a cup of coffee and me telling him, 2 weeks later he's still sipping the same coffee, and I was like, "Sir, I can't. I don't want you drinking that coffee."
Well, hey, this has been incredibly educational. Thanks for coming by today. Thanks for talking to me. Thanks for educating us and educating the listeners.
My pleasure.